Kevin Spacey is here. He is a two-time Oscar-winning actor and the star of the groundbreaking Netflix series House of Cards. Season 4 of the political drama premieres on March 4. Here is a look. It was announced in January that Spacey will become the new chairman of Relativity Studios. This week, he launched an online acting course at masterclass.com. Next month, CNN will premiere a new miniseries, Race for the White House, executive produced and narrated by guess who? Kevin Spacey. I am pleased to have him back at this table. With such a busy schedule, we're lucky to have him. What is it, he said, about Frank Underwood? Why do you like him? Why do we find him fascinating? Is it evil incarnate?
Look, it seems to me that, we could go back a long ways and say we have been fascinated by political figures, by royalty. I mean, you just think about Shakespeare. And obviously Frank Underwood was born out of Shakespeare. He was based, Michael Dobbs, when he wrote the book, based him on Richard III and right, to some degree Iago. Not Macbeth, because Macbeth hesitated.
Frank does not.
Frank does
hesitate.
And, if you ignore the murdering and the conniving, he is a politician who gets things done. And I think there is something to that in itself as to why people have really been attracted to the show, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Do you think that the image of that is part of the reason that Donald Trump seems attractive to so many people? He appears to be willing to say anything, do anything, and get things done if you buy into his own sense of who he is.
Well, there's no doubt that he seems to have burrowed into an angry public.
But looking for someone...
I guess just looking for someone who does it differently. So I suppose there is an interesting similarity there. Apparently, I'm told this is true, that there are a great number of people in China who believe that I actually am the President of the United States.
I'm told they love House of Cards in China.
Yes, they do.
And that the leadership there, not a particular person, but of members of the elite, most of all.
Yeah, they love it.
And they think of it as this is America.
Yes, and there's also an interesting other sidebar to that, which is that apparently the elites and all that, the people in government, you're right, but for the common man, Frank Underwood is viewed as a man fighting against corruption, and he's become something of a heroic figure as a result of that.
But let's talk more about him and what's going to happen this time. She's out of the house. We get that from the promo. They're split.
We meet them as we left them in season 3, having a little bit of an argument.
Yes.
Look, the thing that we've been loving exploring and continue to do so this now 4th season, and we've got some terrific actors that have joined the cast, Ellen Burstyn, Cicely Tyson.
Neve Campbell.
Yeah. And we're going to continue to explore, what happens when two people are in the middle of a campaign and they have this marital strife, and how do they deal with it? And will they ultimately decide that they are better off together? Are they stronger, or are they better off apart? And
is that one of the questions being asked by season 4 of House of Cards? Are they better off together or apart?
Sure.
Who's the toughest, her or him?
I think she is formidable, and he would be nothing without her.
Really? What does she give him?
Everything. I think she gives. Also, I think she gives him balance in lots of ways that he couldn't find on his own. It's if you want to call it the classic story behind every. Well, I don't know if I want to call him a great man, because there are people who think he's more Machiavellian than that. But certainly this remarkable woman, and I think that Robin's extraordinary portrayal will continue to grow and continue to fascinate and continue to confound people as it goes forward.
Do you want us to thank Hillary and Bill when we think of Frank?
No, I mean, look, there were a lot of people who sort of said, oh, well, that must be because he's Southern, but actually he sounds nothing like Clinton.
How does Clinton sound?
You know how he sounds. Has he ever been here?
Yes,
okay.
Many times.
I just didn't know if you could get him or not.
Yes,
no, people thought that, to some degree, they must have based this on real characters. But no, I mean, the original Francis Urquhart as he was called in the British series, as I said, was based on Shakespearean characters.
Right.
And Beau Willimon...
Richard III.
And Beau Willimon ultimately decided to make his hometown and his state, South Carolina, because that's where Beau's father is from. And in the first couple of months as we were preparing, and he was writing those first two scripts, he called his dad one night and asked his father to read a direct address over the phone to him. And then Beau called me after that and said, I think it's going to be South Carolina, where he's going to be from.
But of all the Shakespearean characters you've played, which one has influenced you the more? Which one did you most find resonance?
Well, the truth is I haven't played that many.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, other than high school and scenes, the only Shakespeare plays I've done are Richard II and Richard III, where I played the leading roles.
I thought if you'd done those two, you had done many more.
No, I haven't. I really am.
How could you be the actor you are and never be tempted by Hamlet?
Fake it till you bake it, baby. I mean, it's not that I haven't been tempted, I suppose, but fake it till you bake it, or make it, or whatever.
Whatever it is.
It's one of them sayings.
Yes. No, but I'm serious because I mean, here's a guy who left Hollywood at the top of his game and went to run the Old Vic Theater, and also found out that he could run the Old Vic Theater and also schedule productions and appear in some of them.
Well, but here's the honest truth. You can't go over and run a theater and take all the good parts. You got to give parts to other actors. Yeah. So I took a role or two roles every year, but I didn't want to start off with just doing the classics. I wanted to start off with doing other things that were more diverse, because I was trying to build an audience.
Well, do you like Chekhov better than
No,
Shakespeare?
It's a weird thing. I guess I'm not an actor who covets playing parts. I'm generally excited about doing something when a director that I really want to work with says, I want to see you play this part.
You do care about teaching actors, don't you? And giving actors a chance and furthering and enhancing their career with both advice and opportunity.
It happened to me. I'm a product of a school system where the arts were very well funded, where the experiences that I got as a young kid at 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up to 18 years old was engaging and incredible, and a chance to see professional actors do their work and do workshops with them and do seminars and festivals. And so I know what it means, particularly for that shy kid in the corner. Because when I'm doing workshops, which is why I was pleased that we were able to film Masterclass, because I've been doing these kind of workshops for 20 years, but I've never allowed one to be filmed. And Tucker Carlson, one of our directors from House of Cards, came and directed it. And we had 20 actors. We shot at the arena. And it's really an extraordinary experience to allow an actor to do a monologue. They could do whatever they wanted.
So how does the Masterclass work?
Essentially, I spent over 2 days. We shot about 8 hours with these 20 actors. We did both individual work with their monologues, which I critique and then give them direction, and then they try to go in a new way, or I try to push them in a new way. We then worked with masks, which were these incredible masks you put on your face, and they change the way that you see yourself. In fact, you hopefully stop seeing yourself and work in front of a mirror. It loosens actors up. They stop thinking about their own bodies. And that's a technique to try to get closer to the material, allow yourself to do things that you wouldn't normally feel comfortable doing if you were just looking at yourself in a mirror. And we did about, as I say, about 8 hours of work with these actors. And then I sat and did a one-on-one interview answering a lot of questions, and then they cut this up into about...
From a crowd or from...
No, just direct questions. Right. And then we cut it up into about 25 chapters, and they run 10, 15, 20 minutes long. And people can buy the whole Masterclass. And we've done it now. Yeah, go online. And we've done it now. Serena Williams has done one about tennis. Christina Aguilera's done one. Annie Leibovitz has done one. Usher's done one. And the idea is to eventually get a library of people doing a Masterclass about how they do what they do and trying to help others learn how to do it.
This is you giving notes to a young actor from Masterclass.
What did it feel like?
Good Lord. I mean, you giving me the note to go 90%, because I never want to do too much, I never want to go there, but giving me permission to do that, it came, it hurt. it hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, we got to be willing to do that. We got to be willing to let it hurt. All this notion that acting is, it's pretend, and yes, we enjoy it, and yes, we can have a good time with it. But, if you want to land, you want to make an impact, you want those to remember you, then you have to let it hurt sometimes. You got to get there, because that's all an audience ever wants, is for you to open up your chest and show them you have a heart. That's all we want. It's all we ever want. And whether that heart is in comedy, or whether that heart is in something quite powerful, whether that heart is in poetry, whether that heart is in Shakespeare, a heart, a human being, not an affectation. Wonderful work. Who's next?
See, I think that's great.
Yeah,
I don't think you could do that without a passion about your own profession.
Yeah, and also, look, these kids were fantastic. They prepared, they were open, they were willing to shift things and change things. And the most funny aspect of it to me was that there I found myself over these 2 days, giving direction to someone, saying something, and as it came out of my mouth, whatever I was saying, there were at least 12 times this happened in the course of these 2 days, where I thought to myself, wow, that is a note that I really need to hear myself. That is something I have not been doing. That is something I have forsaken for a while. Boy, that's an important note. And I just say that to illustrate that we are always in the process of learning and growing. And I'll just tell you a story about a workshop I did in the Middle East. I was encouraged to come to Doha and do a workshop in Doha. And as I got closer and closer to going to this workshop, and I've done a whole number of these in the Middle East, because it's a fascinating experience. As I got closer and closer to doing it, the organizers kept saying to me, well, the registrations are going very well, but just don't expect any women. And I go, why? Well, it's really not expected of women, and it's not what they, medicine and lawyer, these are the professions that women are really expected to go into, so just don't expect women. So I arrive in Doha, and I walk into this room, and out of 28, there's 13 women. So I did that workshop, and it was very engaging and very interesting. And I was then asked, would I do a workshop in Abu Dhabi? And I said, under one condition. The entire workshop has to be women. Everyone has to be women. So we had 2 groups of women, and I went to Abu Dhabi, and I did this thing. And people had prepared Shakespeare, and they were doing it in Arabic and also English. And it was this fascinating experience. And I spotted this one young girl in the corner who I could tell, I recognized the shy one because that was me when I was a kid. And she was sort of looking down and occasionally wanted to look up. Her friend had gotten up next to her and performed. And we took a break and we came back, and I said, okay, now who wants to get up now? How about you? And she went, and I said, why not? She said, I don't know any Shakespeare. And I said, well, it doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It could be anything. And she went, well, I was told it had to be Shakespeare. I said, no, do you know something else? Do you know anything? She said, well, I might know something from fried green tomatoes. And I thought, I'm in Abu Dhabi, of all places, and this young girl knows something from fried green tomatoes. So I said, of course. So she gets up and she performs this piece for us. And it was perfunctory, and it was a bit, she was quite self-conscious and just sort of aware that we were watching, so it was quite performance. But I was listening to the content of it, and it was very powerful. So I sat her down and I said, can you tell all of us, what is the central problem that this woman is going through? What is she experiencing? And she began to describe a woman who was in an abusive relationship with a man, and that she was afraid that he was going to begin to beat their child. And I said, okay, I want you to do it again, but this time don't think about us. Don't worry about performing it. Don't just actually sit where you are and just do it again. Do it very simply. Connect to the emotions as best you can, and share with us your feelings. Share your feelings. So we all sat back, and she started it again. And then about midway through, you can see when this thing happens to people, when the nickel drops, when something connects them to the material. And she had a line of dialogue that she'd only said once the first time she did it, but this time she hit her fist and said, "And when he beat me, I thought of God. And when he beat me, I thought of God." And tears flew out of her eyes. I felt the whole room go like this. And she was suddenly connected, remarkable, in a kind of effortless way. And she finished, and I stayed where I was, and I said, "Now, that was beautiful work. We could all tell you why that was different for us. Can you tell us why it was different for you?" And she said something that just illuminated the whole problem. She said, "When you asked me to share my feelings, this is not something I'm ever asked." And I've been trying we did a big event in Sharjah last year, in which we brought together 25 young Middle Eastern actors to do a play. And I'm trying to encourage the leaders there that what's frustrating about seeing them spend all this money building these incredible theaters and these showcases and these fabulous, beautiful buildings to their arts is that when all they do is farm in Cirque du Soleil, they don't create programs and workshops and teaching the young people there who want to be actors, who want to tell stories about their culture. So we've created something that we've called Homegrown, which was this project we did in Sharjah last year. And I want to continue to do more of that because I got a letter about 6 months after that workshop, and that young girl is now trying to move to London to study to be an actress.
Wow.
And that's one of the reasons why no matter what happens to me in my life and all the sort of outward success that happens, I don't want to ever be too far away from that feeling, because I'm one of those kids, and I know, what it meant to me when I was 13 years old and Jack Lemmon, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're a born actor. You should go to New York and do this."
How influential was he?
Huge. And of course, to them...
Just that, though, or the friendship?
Well, I mean, later on, having then met him and been able to work with him professionally in a number of ways, and he became like my father.
But he put his hand on your shoulder and said,
You're a terrific.
Actor.
You're a natural actor. You should go to New York and study. You were born to do this." And I was 13 years old, and I did go to New York and study, and it has become my career. And whenever I find myself in these extraordinary circumstances where I see somebody who so clearly has talent, and so clearly, if they're nurtured, if they're encouraged, if they're guided in some way, they will have a remarkable career ahead of them.
Does this ever occur to you, this thought? You do so many things. You do the master class, and you do the classes that you do in Abu Dhabi and everywhere else. You ran the Old Vic. You are now getting ready to run a studio. You have so many interests. Does that in any way limit the possibility of Kevin's growth as a great actor?
It's a great question. I can only tell you that I think that when I left America in 2003 to go run the Old Vic, part of what was driving me to do it was that I wanted to be a better actor. As much as one tries to sort of keep all the sort of craziness and you get pulled in all these directions when success happens. And one of the reasons I left was because I didn't want to end up doing a lot of movies I probably shouldn't do for money and prestige and to stay on those lists and be that guy and, all that sort of stuff that you see happen when people reach a certain level. But I'm absolutely convinced that I did a play every year or 2 plays every year for the last 12 years. And working with Trevor Nunn or working with Howard Davies or working with Matthew Warchus and doing the kind of parts that I took on and doing runs that were 12 weeks, 14 weeks, 16 weeks, 8 weeks, 7 weeks, night after night after night in performance with Richard III and Sam Mendes all around the world for 10 months. I know.
You were stretching.
Well, and I'm absolutely convinced that if I had not done all of that work, I would never have been ready to play Frank Underwood. There is no way that 12 years ago I would have known what to do.
But what did that give you, do you know, other than simply a sense of your own power?
No, it's more like this. It's more like
I mean power in terms of understanding your talents.
No, well, I'll explain to you this way. It's like if you're a sports, if you're an athlete. You know, I often say in these workshops, when I ask this one question quite often, and it's very amusing, the answer I get, I say, okay, how many times in the last 2 months have you acted? And sometimes the answer will be, well, I had 3 auditions. And I say, that's not the question I asked. How many times in the last 2 months have you acted? Sometimes they'll go, well, I had 3 auditions. I go, okay, so let's just break that down for a second. You're saying to me that this craft that you have dedicated your life to, that you've sat here and told me has meant more to you than anything you've ever been a part of since you were in junior high school, that this craft you only practice when you have an audition?
Yeah.
How many times do you think Andy Murray plays tennis when he only has a championship to play? No, he practices every single day. And that is what doing plays is. It is not getting up and, oh, I do the same performance I gave last night. It is getting up every night and your game is getting better. You're working on a different part of your game. Your partners are changing and growing. And I absolutely believe the act of being watched changes the game. And that's true for sports stars as it is. You know, sports stars will talk about game day versus practice.
Right.
Is very different. And that's true with actors. Rehearsal is nothing like that first preview or that third preview.
Yeah, but I would argue too, and I'm not sure you're saying anything that's different from this. It is that what practice is about is giving you the capacity to be on that field and act primarily by instinct. So that what you do is practice, so that you can meet, as a tennis player does from practice, any occurrence that happens in that game.
That's right.
The practice gives you a chance to let all of the things that you have poured into yourself in terms of skills,
and sometimes
let them out,
and sometimes,
to be able to,
as we see with sports, we don't know the depth that somebody has until they're challenged in a game, and suddenly they dig deeper than we ever thought, or they may have ever thought
someplace
they
didn't even know was there.
And that happens with actors on stage.
Yeah. And it happens in the military too. I mean, the military and the people who act so courageously, they will say, I trained to do that.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
That's right.
I learned how to do that. I mean, Ben Hogan, a great golfer, one of the greatest golfers ever, somebody went out and watched him. He was trying this crazy shot behind a tree. He was going one after the other, And he was a very mechanical guy. And somebody walked up and said, Ben, why are you doing this? You spend 2 hours hitting that shot behind the tree. You know, how often are you going to get to do that? And he said, one day I'll have to do that, and I'll be ready.
It's very true. It's very true. You know? But also the thing so exciting about doing plays is you do get to try it in a different way. You do get to attack it in a different way. You start to go, oh, wow, now I think I understand how to attack that scene because of what I learned last night in this other scene. And so there's this constantly shifting thing, whereas in movies and television, you know, look, no matter how good you might be, you'll never be any better. It's frozen. It never changes.
That's the genius of stage.
Yeah.
Or the joy of stage.
Yeah, totally.
So I want to talk about other things you're doing here. The race for the White House. This is on CNN. You're looking at presidential campaigns. Lincoln Douglas, Kennedy Nixon, Dukakis Bush.
Yeah. I was very jealous about Tom Hanks in that 70s series that he did on CNN, so I thought, let's just get in the game a little bit, you know, just a 6-part series, let's do it. And so I narrated as well as produced it.
So why do you do this, though? In other words, I'm glad you're doing it. I'm thrilled you're doing it. I'm happy that CNN, I'm a political junkie. That's the reason I watch Underwood, that's the reason I watch this, and that's the reason I participate. But why you? Why was it because you love politics? Was it because you were jealous of what Hanks had done? Was it what?
Yeah, it is I love politics. I think it's fascinating in the middle of a presidential election to look back at other elections, to look at what did candidates do, what did they say, what impressions were left, were there defining moments where something happened in the middle of a campaign that sealed someone's fate, and it seemed so arbitrarily unimportant,
well,
and
one
yet...
one of the things that happened in the caucus, one was the commercials by Bush. On the other hand, the other thing was...
The tank.
The tank.
Yeah, the tank, yeah. Or Howard Dean, or we don't examine that, but Howard Dean, that or George H.W. is looking at his watch.
Sometimes it doesn't. People thought for a moment that might define Marco Rubio's campaign, that moment in which it couldn't... He kept saying the same thing.
Right, he kept saying the same thing, yeah.
You know? Yeah. And you wonder, how could he do that? He rebounded from that. And so that image is no longer there.
Yeah.
And he's finishing in second place in the recent contest.
But look, I understood that. Anybody who's ever done a junket knows that you sit there on, all day long saying the same damn thing. I was just like, oh, I totally understand. you try to change it up, when you're doing a press junket so that you don't bore yourself, You can only imagine.
Tell me back to Netflix. Bo Williams is leaving, right?
Yeah, he's tired. I mean, he has, I got to tell you, my admiration, my praise for his craft, his dedication to, he's a playwright.
I know.
He's been such an incredible person to work with, an amazing collaborator. I mean, we've had such a great time arguing and discussing and tearing things apart and finding solutions, and never in any way, shape, or form other than being motivated by wanting to make the show the best show as possible. And I adore him, and I'm going to miss him, and it is my intention to make sure that we honor the show that he created.
You've already signed for a 5th season.
I am. It is in discussion. Yes.
Is that it?
There's a discussion.
Or they've announced that there will be a 5th season.
I believe
they can't
they've
announce
announced
it unless they've signed you, can they?
Charlie, have they announced another season for you here?
No,
because you haven't. Yeah, that's right.
What was it Jack Lemmon said to you once about? It was about, I think, elevators. He said, you always got to send the elevator back down.
Yeah, that was his philosophy. Well, it's funny,
because it's about what we're talking about.
It's about what we're talking about. It's about workshops. It's about all the things that Jack passed down to me, which was that he believed, and he didn't just say this about actors. He said, if you've been successful in the business that you wanted to be successful in, if you've had some terrific success, then it's your obligation to spend a good portion of your time sending the elevator back down. And to pull yourself together, people are talking.
So good. And, you can shift from one to the other. I mean, you could go to Carson, you could go to Clinton, you could go to Jack.
I love doing them. I have to start working on new impressions because I've been doing them too often, and now I have to start working on new ones. I was just talking to your team here about working on a Charlie Rose. I said it will involve a lot of hands. That's hands, and cups, and computers.
I want to take a look at this. This is a scene from, this is Claire. This is number 3, boys and girls, in which Claire is offering Frank an interesting proposition. Here it is.
And do you remember when my mother almost left Daddy because he funded your campaign? That's how much she hated you. But I didn't care, because I saw something. I saw a future, our future.
We had a future until you started destroying it.
Oh, you wouldn't have listened otherwise.
Well, all right, Claire. I'm listening now. What is it you so desperately needed to say?
We've never lost a race in 30 years. We started here, and we've always won. You and I, together. You don't have a viable running mate. We both know it can't be Donald Blythe.
Well, of course not. But I have to win the goddamn nomination before I can start worrying about running.
Even if I hadn't done what I did, your race is in real trouble. You need me, Francis.
What does Francis need?
Oh, so much. So much. Right there, he needs a whiskey is what he needs right there.
He needs her to do what?
And by the way, she directed this.
She did?
Yeah, Robin.
Well, she's in full flight, isn't she?
She's fantastic.
Full flight.
I love working with her as a director. I mean, you know, you've known her a long time. I've known her a very, very long time, and the trust and the real, true, genuine enthusiasm and joy we have in coming to work every day. We just make each other laugh all day long. People would be shocked because the show's so serious that we'd literally giggle all day long. It's very hard for us to get a serious take at all.
You know what I mean by this question. You simply love performing. You love audiences. Yeah. You love applause. You love doing it right.
Yeah, yeah. There's I mean, look, it's all I've ever known is you know, I made my mother laugh when I did impressions, and it's not much has changed in terms of what motivates me since. I love, you know, it's always so funny to me, and my mother used to laugh about the fact that, you know, people always think of you as so dark and so, and yet I love making people laugh more than anything.
I'm going to the race for the White House. One clip here I want you to see. This is a clip discussing Kennedy's secret illness for Kennedy versus Nixon. Here it is. See it.
Kennedy had a major foe trying to bring him down at every opportunity. His name was Lyndon B. Johnson, the Senate Majority Leader from Texas.
Johnson wants the nomination for himself, and he's prepared to play dirty.
Lyndon Johnson's allies and friends at the convention begin to talk about Kennedy's health problems.
Kennedy had serious health problems, Addison's disease. He had a hormonal deficiency that could have killed him. In fact, his father put medicine in safe deposit vaults all over the United States so that Kennedy would never run short.
So what Johnson does is he makes it a campaign issue.
The Kennedy forces denied it vociferously and had doctors come out and say that he was above average in health and energy and vitality, and he had never had so-called Addison's disease, and they lied through their teeth.
Kennedy's illness is never mentioned again. It's a victory for JFK's team, if not for truth.
Had the American public known just how sick Jack Kennedy was, he probably could not have been a presidential candidate.
It's interesting stuff. That's history.
Yeah. Well, it's also, it sort of says that there was a period of time where people knew things.
And you could hide things.
Yeah, you could hide things.
You didn't know about the affairs, any of that stuff. You're playing in a movie called Elvis and Nixon?
Elvis Nixon, yes.
Elvis Nixon. This is the famous story of Elvis going to the White House to see Richard Nixon.
Yes.
And he wanted something. What do you want, a sheriff's badge or something?
He wanted more than that. He was deeply concerned about where drugs. America was. Yeah. And he wanted to be made a federal agent undercover.
A federal agent undercover?
Yeah, undercover.
Yes. I mean, nobody would recognize him?
Yeah, nobody would recognize him. And he could infiltrate the Black Panthers and any communist organizations.
This is not
serious.
what he wanted to do.
This is absolutely serious.
I thought it was about the drug war or something. He wanted to be a drug czar.
Well, he was concerned about the Vietnam protests. He was concerned that people were not respecting law enforcement or the presidency, and so he flew to Washington, wrote a 6-page letter to Richard Nixon, and wanted to be made an undercover federal agent at large. And Nixon didn't want to meet him. Yeah. Haldeman didn't want Nixon to meet him.
Who convinced him?
Nixon's daughter.
Is that right?
Yeah. She finally called her father, Julie. She called her father and said she couldn't believe that he was not going to meet Elvis Presley, who was in town just to meet him. And so Nixon reluctantly agreed to meet Elvis. And our tagline,
great picture.
It's a great picture, but our tagline, I think, illustrates the kind of tone of movie that we've made. And it says, on December 20th, 1970, 2 of America's greatest recording artists met for the first time.
This is a comedy.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, we play it quite seriously, but it is just this side of Dr. Strangelove.
Recording artist.
It is just crazy. And it was fascinating to play Nixon unencumbered by Watergate, because this is a year and a half before he started taping in the White House, and many years before Watergate. And he's just a fascinating character to sort of get your head around the kind of...
And how did you do that?
Well, I listened to a lot of hours and hours and hours of the tapes, and particularly the phone conversations, just to try to understand his grumpiness. You know, he was old, you know, everything was goddamn, people have come in the goddamn thing. He used such bad language in the Oval Office. I think that may have shocked Americans more than the 18-minute gap, was his use of language. So trying to get a sense of his physicality, because you couldn't do an imitation of him and have it sustained for more than a sketch.
Yeah.
And Michael Shannon, who's a fantastic Chicago actor, he's about to do Long Day's Journey here on Broadway, is playing Elvis Presley, and he was terrific.
But did you look at any of the performances of Hopkins and all those other performances?
I actually weirdly went back and looked at my own performance when I had screen tested for Frost Nixon.
Did you really?
Yeah, because Ron Howard needed to see the actors if they could really do it. So I went back and I found this film that I'd completely thought was gone. And it was really interesting for me to watch it because I did it too much. I talked too slowly. There were a number of things I actually learned from watching that screen test that I had done. So I'd had another whack at it. But this time around, I'm pleased that it feels like both Michael and I found a way to embrace the essence of these two characters, who, at the end of the day, you would think wouldn't necessarily have anything in common, but really liked each other and respected each other by the end of this meeting.
Wow. Frank Langella got that role, didn't he?
That's right, which he'd done on stage.
How often do you get turned down for a big role like that? And how often do you audition for a big role like that? Or screen test? And it doesn't bother you at all?
No,
because the director wants to see if he can see something.
Yeah, if a director wants to see you, he's not sure you can do it, and if you like the part and you think it's interesting, I think actors should be willing to do anything that's reasonable.
You don't feel rejected at all?
No, I mean, look, you live with rejection, you know, and the truth is, look, there are also parts that I have gotten that other actors turn down. And I'm enormously grateful that they turned them down because they wouldn't have ever come to me if they'd taken them.
Yeah, but you would never play a talking cat.
Oh. Meow, meow. He's going to bring up meow, meow. Look, you know why I did this movie?
No.
Because it's a kid's movie.
Yeah.
And I rarely get a chance to do
What's it called, 9 Lives?
It's called 9 Lives. I rarely get a chance to do...
You're the voice of a cat.
Well, I am a man who is turned into a cat.
Yes, okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Fletcher comes to life.
What kind of cat are you?
Well, I'm not a cat person. I'm a dog person.
Yes.
And as much as I tried to convince them to make me into an adorable dog, it was a cat film. But one hopes that this will be a film that families will enjoy and kids will enjoy.
Now, we've been talking about a range of things, not studio head. What's that about? Why are you doing that?
Well, I can't
get
get...
You have a secret desire to be a mogul?
I can't get... Well, I'm hoping for a big yacht.
You've earned it, for God's sake.
I can't talk any specifics. I can just say to you this. Well, because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a huge... Lawyers, they're all doing their jobs. So
there's a bankruptcy involved in this,
and I have nothing to do with that. But there's a lot to be sorted out.
They went broke, and you're going to come in and rescue them? Is
something
that
like that. But look, let me just say in the abstract, the idea of being able to help people tell their stories, and be that what I did at the Old Vic for 12 years or what I have been doing as a producer for many years, to find filmmakers who have stories that are character-driven dramas, that are interesting, that have great characters, that are important, particularly in a time when the studios have probably, for all intents and purposes, abandoned those kinds of films within a certain budget. So there's always been an appeal and an attraction to me about trying to help people make their dreams come true.
Well said. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
It really is.
Get some rest.
Thank you, sir.